The American Adoption Congress presents the 13th International Conference, April 11th to the 14th, 1981, in Garden Grove, California. This is program number D151, tape 3A.
My name is Beverly Zimmerman. I'm from New Jersey. And I thought, well, first of all, I woke up at 4:30 this morning with jet lag, so I rewrote this whole thing. So I'll try and figure out what I've written. There are handouts if you'd like to get them when you come in. This is a talk about my research, and I have been studying Birthmothers' memories of feelings experienced in surrender, search, reunion, and beyond. This came about because I felt that because we've had so much openness, at least supposedly, so much openness in adoption, I still felt that birth mothers were the silent members of the triad, and that people really didn't understand, particularly clinicians, therapists, and educators, that they, unless you were directly involved in the adoption movement, you really didn't have a source to find out what birth mothers felt. And I felt as if birth mothers really were invisible. The purpose of this presentation is to shed light on those feelings that are remembered by birth mothers as they look back longitudinally over time to the time of surrender, the time of search, the time when they found their child, the time of reunion, and after reunion, and then today. This is descriptive research. I don't enjoy statistics, and I really felt that this had to be theory-building research because I don't think the theory exists out there about what birth mothers feel. I'll tell you a little bit about myself first. I surrendered my son when I was 25 years old. For years I thought that was really too old, that people didn't surrender children when they were 25. And I thought I was really very unique until 2 years ago when I came to the AAC conference in New York and discovered that the lady sitting next to me had done the same thing. And then I discovered there were lots of other people out there like me. I love the term this morning, recovering birth mother. I'm going to use that from now on. I absolutely love it. I was reunited with my son because of coming to the AAC conference 2 years ago in New York, and I reunited with him when he was 25. 2 years later, we have sort of gotten to know each other. His name is John, and he refers to me as Beverly. And I refer to myself to him as Beverly. I don't like that particularly. That hurts still. And I feel that he's my son, and I'm his mother. But for the moment, it's okay. I'm Beverly. I discovered that my feelings toward adoption changed tremendously after my reunion with him. And I didn't have a clue about what my feelings were until then. So let me go quickly through my feelings, and then I will go through the research that I've done. When I was searching, I was really caught up in the intrigue of everything and the excitement of the detective work. My daughter helped me spend hours at the New York Public Library, and she was excited. I also felt a lot of disappointment when I didn't have any success. And my efforts consisted of spurts of activity followed by long, dry periods of doing nothing. My feelings hadn't surfaced as yet, and I believed that I was somehow preparing myself for what lay ahead, and that I needed that time, sort of when you do a doctoral dissertation, and you work real hard for a little bit, and then you have to let it sit a while and stew in your head. When I began the search, I couldn't remember the exact address of the hospital, the exact day of his birth, the name and exact address of the doctor, and I attributed all of this to old age. I had remembered him every day of his life, but I could not remember the specific details. Little did I realize that my feeling and my amnesia were experienced by many other birth mothers, and this was not at all uncommon. And these things were validated for me later when I met people. When I saw John's picture for the first time, he became real to me. And at that point, my oldest daughter, who had helped me with the search, backed off. She said that she didn't like the way he looked. He was beautiful. And I guess whatever her fantasies were, they became real for her also on that day. I was shocked that he looked like my younger daughter, my brother, and my father. I just really hadn't anticipated that there would be a striking family resemblance. That just hadn't occurred to me. I hadn't really thought about what he would look like. I liked what I saw. I felt connected to him just after seeing his picture, and I was eager to contact him and meet him, but I was very frightened. And I wanted to do it right. I felt that this was probably a very important thing that I was doing, and I really didn't want to mess it up. But my feelings were still very much blocked. It was all intellectual. How am I going to do this? I contacted an adoptee who was very, very helpful to me in writing the letter. Little needs to be said about the reunion. We all know what reunions are like. You see them on TV every other day. Oprah runs them over and over again, and Sally Jesse Raphael, you know, et cetera, et cetera. Rumors are the myth, I think, of adoption. And my reunion for that night was exactly identical to what you would see on TV. I mean, I was thrilled to death. He was thrilled to death. I wanted to tell the whole world. I loved him. He loved me. My kids loved him. My husband loved him. It was just absolutely unreal. My feelings were very, very frightening that night. I found that I could not sit next to him on the couch. I just couldn't. I had to get up and sit in the rocking chair to distance myself from him. It was just too close. And it took me probably 6 months after we knew each other before I could even eat a meal with him, eat anything with him. I couldn't serve him water or cake on his birthday. I just couldn't do it. My self-esteem on the night of the reunion was probably higher than it had been in 25 years or more, probably more than that. And that lasted, I like to say I was in Gaga land that night. I really was. That lasted for less than 24 hours. Then the reality hit. And the feelings that I didn't even know I had just flooded me. I didn't know that I needed to grieve. I didn't know that I was angry. I really didn't know what feelings I had. And all I knew was that he was gone again. And that his parents wanted nothing to do with me. And that I knew nothing about him. I felt such overwhelming grief over the lost years and over the loss of his life. And I remembered a baby, a roly-poly, blonde, 8-pound, 9-ounce baby. And here was a young man standing in front of me. And I had no idea what he ate or what he wore or what kind of clothes he liked, how he had grown. I knew nothing at all about him. When I had dreams after that, for his mother had sent me the night of the reunion some pictures of him when he was just a toddler, like in a playpen. And I had dreams of him growing to that age, but never any older than that. And I still haven't. I really hated myself, and I hated the agency. I hated the Catholic Church. I hated his parents. I hated my family. I hated my husband, and I hated my children, because none of them understood me. None of them had a clue why I was sitting in the rocking chair crying day after day after day. I called my mother up to tell her about this grandchild that she had, and I discovered that she had known all along and hadn't helped me or reached out to help me or had never mentioned it. And the rage I felt was just indescribable. And I think I still feel it. I haven't forgiven yet. I can't. So I really felt the anger suddenly came upon me. And at that time I also became accident prone. We were in Maine on vacation. I was sort of preoccupied thinking about him, thinking when was he going to call me, and I fell into a ravine head first, and I kind of ruined everything and broke some ribs and everything. And then at work a couple months later, I fell and broke my elbow, and I thought I had multiple sclerosis. I was tested for every disease that you can imagine, Lyme disease, multiple sclerosis, every other thing, for months and months and months. And the first doctor that I ever saw after I had reunited with John had said, "You're depressed." And I said, "Oh no, that's hogwash. I'm not depressed. Are you kidding? I'm angry, but I'm not depressed." And he was right. I was depressed. During the time before I realized I was depressed, when I was angry, I started telling people about John. First it was an excitement, but then it became almost like a women's lib kind of shove it in their face reaction. I'm going to tell you about this experience that I had, and all women have these kinds of experiences. And I remember one day at work, I was in a meeting with some philosophy professors. They're kind of old, stodgy kind of guys, you know, and I read them the witnessing paper of my experience, and I was just waiting to see their mouths drop open. And I think it was my anger. I'm convinced it was my anger. And their mouths dropped open, you know, and one of them said, how did you get him? And one of the women in the group, who was a sociologist, made light of it and said, "Well, the stork brought him." And that took care of that question. But then as I became more and more aware of how I felt about myself, I became much less willing to tell anybody about him. I was really asking to be rejected. And the reality was I wasn't being rejected. I was being told that they admired my honesty, they cried with me, they said I presented the case intelligently. And so people didn't reject me in the way that I had anticipated. As our second reunion year arrived, depression hit, and I turned the anger against myself. I confronted how much I blamed myself for the events, and I really could not forgive me. And that's when my research began, because I really felt that birth mothers, my experience couldn't be unique. And I didn't like other people saying how birth mothers felt, or single birth mothers saying how they felt. Like me telling you how I felt doesn't mean anything, because I felt we needed a theoretical base of how all birth mothers feel, and there had to be some commonalities, because I was becoming aware of them. All this time I was going through the motions. I had a reunion with my son and my brother and his family, and everyone remarked about how much they felt as if they'd known him all of his life, and I was in awe that he probably never had been in a room with so many people that he looked like or acted like or had gestures like, and that must have been rather overwhelming for him. I was very depressed. I just sort of sat like a lump the whole day, and I don't think I talked to anybody. I entered counseling, was put on medication, and for me, that was a miracle. I could very tentatively say in therapy the words that I had not spoken, and when I was pregnant, if anyone had said these words to me, I'm sure I would have hit them, because I didn't believe them. It was impossible. But the words were that you became pregnant because you wanted to love and to be loved. Now that was quite an indictment of me, that I became pregnant, that I did it for selfish reasons, that it was something that I needed and wanted. And that made the loss even worse, of course. And of course, that's what was always in the literature, but I didn't ever believe it. And I no longer wanted to tell people. I really felt that this was a black mark. And my children started bringing it up at that point, and I got very angry at them for bringing it up. I felt as if they were putting it in my face, you know, how can you bring up this terrible thing that I have done? Several months ago, John and I had lunch together. It's the first time we'd ever been alone together. It felt good. I feel much more calm and peaceful with him now. And after lunch, we drove around town, and it felt okay. He didn't really want to leave, and I didn't really want to leave, but it was as if we both knew that we'd see each other again and it was going to be okay. And I realized that I had moved out of anger, out of depression, into the stage of bargaining. And I began saying things like, well, they had him for 25 years, and I've known him for 3 years. And when I'm 50, I will have known him for 27 years, and they'll have known him for 50 years, but the percentage is, you know, better than it was this year, so every year that goes by, the percentage will be better. And kind of worked it out in my mind that way. I figured that's not really too bad. And I also learned that patience is very important and that it takes a time to develop a relationship with someone. It doesn't just happen at the moment of reunion. We share time together now, and I really realize that we're developing the kind of relationship that is really basically uncharted. There aren't a whole lot of models for that kind of a relationship, and what was said this morning was very meaningful to me. Now, in terms of the research, what I wanted birth mothers to do was to look back longitudinally to the times that were critical, and I used an adjective checklist that contained 500 and some odd words. And it was a checklist that I had used when I did my doctoral dissertation on empathy. So I was very familiar with it, and I really wanted to have an open-ended kind of questionnaire for birth mothers to respond to, because I really wanted to get their feelings. And the adjectives were already grouped into 7 categories. So I figured once the birth mothers had given me their feelings, I would take the feelings and group them into these 7 categories, and then I could tell what was going on. At the Origins Convention a year ago in New Jersey, I had the questionnaires distributed. You want to take a moment to get a questionnaire? There probably aren't enough of the results because I ran out. I have another whole stack here.
Oh, it's a whole stack.
Yeah, take one. You'll have to share the results. I'm sorry that I don't have any more. I think it's helpful to have the questionnaire in front of you, because then at least you can see. That's all there is, just the questionnaire. I'm out of the other, I'm sorry. I distributed about 80 questionnaires and only 3 were returned. Now, it was not in this form. So I figured, well, they didn't do it right. I couldn't be there personally because my husband was in the hospital, and I figured they hadn't done it right. But then I found out they had, and I felt that it was too open-ended. So I reduced the number of adjectives to 185. And I again tried, and this time I gave 20 to personal friends that I thought would really do it for me. And they didn't. And they said, I can't. I really wanted to, but it's too painful. I can't do it. And then I realized that it wasn't how it's given out. It was the fact that it was too open-ended, and it was too painful for them to deal with the open-ended aspect of it. So I decided to move to multiple choice, which in the end was much easier to deal with for me as well as for them. And when I passed those out, people were easily able to do them. In fact, I had a few people who responded that there weren't enough choices, but there were places for comments everywhere. And what I found is that birth mothers wrote all over the paper. And so once they had to limit their choices, then they could respond, and they could also add their comments, which was very helpful. And the choices that I picked, I had a meeting with a researcher where I work, and she's not a birth mother. In fact, she responded with horror when I told her who I was. And she said I should have more positive responses. And I was still in anger then, so that seemed weird to me. But we added more positive responses, and I still got more negatives in there than positives, but nonetheless. And they generally fit the categories that I had originally intended. I'm still collecting responses, so in a sense, these findings are preliminary. It's the kind of thing where I can keep going till I have thousands of them. It doesn't matter. And so if anyone wants to fill one out, I'd appreciate it. So I asked people to look back over time, and I chose the 6 critical times: surrender, the beginning of search, or search, when they found the child, when they were reunited, after reunion, and then today, the day that they filled it out. I have responses demographically from 40 women from 14 states, and their mean age at time of surrender was 20 years. That surprised me. Expected it would have been younger. They ranged in age from 15 to 26. The mean year of surrender was 1966, with a range from 1954 to 1975. So we were women of the 60s. We had known Camelot, and we had known Vietnam. The mean reunion age of our children, this also surprised me, was 22 years, with a range from 13 years to 30 years. We never forgot our children, but we waited until they were grown to attempt a reunion. 45% of the birth mothers sampled never had children after the surrender. 45% of the women who responded had had no subsequent children, not just due to infertility, but some of them wrote in that they couldn't form a relationship with a man, or they couldn't find anyone suitable, or they just couldn't bear the thought of having another child. 8 of the birth mothers sampled had either not found their children or not reunited with them. And in all but 3 of the cases, the birth mothers had found their children. So that does skew the results a little bit because of the sample. Now, if you look on figure number 1, and I do apologize, if you could find someone to look on with. Let me explain this. They're all done essentially the same, so if I explain one, you can understand most of them. As I think back to the day I surrendered my child, I remember feeling, and then the choices are at the bottom: happy, loving, brave, helpless, scared, angry, or hopeless. We just sort of picked one word to match each one. Some cases, we picked the word that fit on the computer. And then at the top, in relation to myself, my plans, my child, adoptive parents, my family, and sealed records. So on figure number 1, the birth mothers report that they felt helpless and hopeless about themselves. None reported feeling happy or brave about themselves. And the plans, in regard to the plans they made for their children, there were feelings of love and fear. Feelings about their child were overwhelmingly loving, as you can see. There were other feelings also. Feelings reported of helplessness and being scared were also reported to a lesser extent, however. Birth mothers felt happy, hopeless, and angry toward the adoptive parents. Remember, this is at the point of surrender. Interestingly, the least amount of anger toward the adoptive parents, one of the least times, was reported at the time of surrender. Feelings most often reported toward their families, meaning the families of the birth mother, were anger and hopelessness. And sealed records evoked feelings of helplessness and anger. This is at the time of surrender, which is very interesting because I've heard lots of people say, the birth mother is the one who wants the sealed records. And this would lead one to believe that I'm not the only one who disagrees with that. Wouldn't necessarily have been in my sample, exactly. Sure, no problem. Okay, now let me quote some things that the birth mother said. These were confidential. I don't know who said these things, but I've just taken their words. They got me hook, line, and sinker. I believed everything they told me. I stood alone in the next person. I stood alone in the courtroom crying. The judge seated high somewhere asked, "Do you understand what you are doing?" I said yes, but I didn't. The next person, completely numb is more like it. The next person, I don't remember, I blocked it out. The next person, just a horrible, horrible day. I can still remember that day and still cry. It was a funeral day that lingers for me yet today. It was really a tragedy. On figure number 2, this deals with, oh, I'm sorry. There are more. Turn the page. Another birth mother said, I feel most frustrated that no one ever asked me what I wanted, to keep my baby, and helped work out a plan for that. And again, that was mentioned this morning. Another birth mother said, please don't leave out sad. There is much pain at this time. The other words don't fit. I was too ignorant of what was going on to feel contented or responsible, and too scared and sad to feel happy. And sealed records were just there. There was nothing to think about. There was no option. And the last person, I was numb and tried not to feel or even think about any of it. I didn't know anything about sealed records, and I was told nothing about adoptive parents. I have little memory of it. So that sort of validates a lot of the numbness and amnesia that was at that time. Figure 2 talks about the search for the child. I'm sorry, it should not. Figure 2 is supposed to talk about the plans. what am I doing here? Excuse me. Well, we'll talk about the search. The search for the child. I'm sorry, the plans come later. Yes, they are. Okay. When I think back to the search for my child, many people felt very scared to search, and yet the search itself was empowering. And many felt brave about themselves. At the time of the search, anger joined scared and loving as predominant emotions about the plans made for the child. One comment about the plans made for the child, I worded that sentence very carefully, and I worded it, what were the plans that you made for your child? Because I felt that was empowering. And I also felt that it acknowledged that we make plans, whether they're conscious or unconscious, by doing or by not doing, and that in any event, the birth mother made plans for the child, however she chose to. Now, I had several people who responded, not a majority, but a couple, who said, I didn't make the plans. And I can't comment about it because I'm not the one who made the plans. And so that's sort of an aside, but I thought that was important. Okay, at the time of search, searchers did not feel brave about the plans that they had made, and they continued to feel loving about their children, but scared at the same time. Anger and hopelessness, though, about the child were missing. And while they still felt happy toward the adoptive parents, fear and anger had increased. There were no reports of bravery here. Feelings toward their families and toward sealed records, however, were overwhelmingly angry. And the birth mothers wrote, it didn't seem real. My son did not seem real to me. I felt kind of crazy. Like, what if I made this up? Did this really happen? Do I really have a kid out there somewhere? Other people are starting to validate my feelings, and that's probably what saved me. Another one wrote, once I acknowledged I hadn't put it behind me, I resented everyone who thought I had, my mother in particular. And the third person wrote, initially, as I began my search, I was filled with doubts that I would ever find her, because it was a private adoption that had occurred halfway across the country. The hospital had destroyed my records. Sometimes I felt like my whole pregnancy and relinquishment hadn't really occurred, but was just a bad dream. I was furious about sealed records, but as my search continued and I connected with the right people, I knew I would find my daughter tomorrow or 6 years more. I knew I would find her. Then I began to feel more powerful, as if I were beating the system and recovering some of my dignity that had been taken. In Figure 3, I talk about the time when the child is found, but reunion has not occurred yet. And mothers who searched and found reported feeling happy and brave about themselves. They reported feeling angry about the plans that they had made about their children, for their children, but not hopeless about them. They reported that they continued to feel loving toward their children, and also now they were feeling happy and scared. Hopelessness had disappeared, and they felt happy and angry also toward the adoptive parents. That seemed to be rather consistent. Happy and angry, and then at the very end, angry and happy. And also toward sealed records. Sealed records still continue to generate even more anger, as you can see. Birth mothers wrote, I was relieved about my child. Another one said, I was anxious, uncertain, wondered if I measured up to my son's expectations, excited that all my questions could be answered. The next one, I felt left behind. My son was obviously, better taken care of than I was as a child. I felt jealous. Of course, I can't know this for sure. And the last one said, it was finally not a dream. I could hardly accept that something so cruel and horrible had happened to my child and myself. How could I have let this happen to us? Why did the adults and professionals exploit us? And figure number 4 deals with the moment of reunion. And moment has, in my opinion, has a surprising amount of anger in it. The anger is the black. It certainly was the most important moment for members of the adoption triad, and birth mothers report that they felt happy, loving, scared, and brave. They did not feel anger or hopelessness toward themselves at that moment. And thoughts about plans for the child evoked feelings of anger, happiness, love, and helplessness. Hopelessness and fear were absent. The child is thought about lovingly and happily. Anger and hopelessness toward the child were absent. And anger and happiness toward the adoptive family and the birth mother's family were almost equal. Sealed records continued to be very full of anger. Birth mothers wrote, I had difficulty answering questions about others. Interestingly, they had less to say about the moment of reunion than other times. There were fewer comments. Felt indifferent about adoptive parents. Another one, they seem to, the comments at this point seem to be tangential to the reunion, which I thought was also interesting. My family has been 100% for me, and their support has never wavered. The day my son called and came to visit was just wonderful, happy, and most of all, unbelievable. I was kept at bay by the adoptive family for 6 years after contact. For 25 years, people had spoken for me, and finally I felt I had taken charge of the emotions that were so old. Everyone believed them as fact. Another one said, just told my family all were happy, surprised, and excited. And the last person, I was happy to know he had a better life than I could have given to him, and he was healthy. And I made someone very happy to have him who was unable to have children of their own. He went to a good family. The thing that I remember feeling was, when I found him, which is just an aside, is that he was alive, because I didn't know that. Figure 5 summarizes the feelings after, at the time of reunion, toward the adoptive parents. I'm sorry. Yes?
Figure 4,
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious about the gray segment on the sealed record. How do you know?
The gray segment?
Brave.
Brave. Because they had gone against the system. And they had gone into the underground and gotten the information. Yes. That's very empowering. Figure 5 discusses the time after reunion. And here you can see that anger reappears and gets much larger toward the adoptive parents. Well, actually, later you'll see that I put them all together so you can see it in the whole series. Overall, birth mothers reported feeling happy about themselves. Feelings toward the plans were loving and angry. Feelings toward the family, toward the child were predominantly loving and happy. Feelings toward the adoptive family were more angry than anything else. And feelings toward the birth mother's family were angry, happy, and sealed records evoked almost completely anger. In figure 6, the birth mothers no longer felt helpless. They felt bravery, happiness, and their love predominated. Now, in figure 7 through 12, what I have done, I've taken the feelings about myself, which is one category, and categorized them differently. In other words, what were the feelings about myself at the time of surrender, the time of search, at the time when they're found, so that you can compare them across time. They're the same results. They're just put in a different order so that you can look at one next to another. And for example, feelings about myself in the very beginning, there's really a lot of helplessness. And that decreases with the search. And the feelings about being happy about myself and also being loving are the highest post-reunion, which is interesting because that was not my experience. I have some thoughts on that when I get to the conclusion, but it's an interesting thing. When you look at the feelings on figure number 8 about the plans I made for my child, fear and love going across time. You start with fear, primarily fear and love, and then when you move across time, you get more fear mixed with bravery and anger, and then increased anger, and then increased love at the very end. But the anger is still very strong there. When you look at the child, feelings about the child, you can see that its love is predominant all the way across at each point in time. And when you look at feelings about the adoptive parents, the anger goes highest at the point of reunion, but the hopelessness is absent at that point. And at the point post-reunion, rather. The hopelessness is gone, and then it comes back. So it's interesting. Feelings toward my family. I think that I would interpret this to say that the person sort of makes peace with their family, but the anger is still there. Today, if you look at today versus at the point of surrender, there's quite a difference. The point of surrender, there's a tremendous amount of hopelessness, anger, and then every other emotion is represented. But when you look at the today, you see much less hopelessness, more love, more happiness, and more bravery. And then this is the one for sealed records, which sort of tells the story all by itself. At surrender, the primary emotions are helplessness and anger. Now, in summary, because I want to leave time for questions, I think you need to be able to look at these and respond yourself. Obviously, birth mothers do report changes over time, and they report that love for their child is constant. The amount of mothers reporting it changes over time. Remember, this is based on the number of people who report having the feeling, not on the dimension of the feeling itself. That's important to remember. The reports of anger about sealed records are high, and they increase over time. The elements of the grief process are reported throughout: anger, helplessness, hopelessness, and searching empowers women. There's an increase in bravery whenever you look at anything regarding searching. And the joy of reunion is replaced by changed feelings post-reunion, not necessarily negative feelings. In conclusion, my conclusions are that grief over the loss of a child becomes work that must be done post-reunion. And the likelihood is that it did not get done before reunion. Birth mothers need support during this process in order not to get stuck in anger. And I've been in many support groups where anger was the predominant feeling, and it was as if people couldn't get past that. I think it's important to get past it. Or B, revert back to denial, because the denial is just as bad, really, as the anger. And in order to complete the grief process, you have to move through bargaining to acceptance. You're not going to get that done until you've dealt with the anger and the denial. Denial, however, I think is a survival mechanism that birth mothers absolutely need in order to surrender their children, and also in order to survive the feelings that are too painful to bear. My denial was something to see. I mean, I wrote articles about adoptive parents. Many of my friends had adopted children. When I found my son and got involved with birth mothers, they were horrified that I could possibly have written such an article about adoptive parents. But you see, I needed to believe that whatever the situation, adoptive parents were doing a wonderful job. And that was the only thing that kept me going. And if they succeeded in parenting, then that was as if I had succeeded. And that helped my denial and my state of mind. I had one friend who was not a successful adoptive parent. And I remember that bothered me terribly at the time and later on. Search and reunion are critically important in order for grief work to be done. And in order for delayed chronic grief and depression to be dealt with and resolved. I'm convinced that I was chronically depressed for 25 years. There's no doubt about that in my mind. I didn't cry. The tears I cried after reunion were enough to last me 25 years, but when my father died, I didn't cry. I was tough, I didn't cry. And I kept saying, oh, it's because of my background and because of what I do and all of this, but it was because of me, and it was because I hadn't even begun to deal with the feelings. And I think birth mothers need to be able to deal with that, and they need help doing it. So the support groups need to learn how to help women deal with their grief and move past their anger and get past their denial also. Acceptance, as I said, is the last stage of grief work, and birth mothers need to be helped to forgive themselves, to forgive their plans, to forgive their child, to forgive the adoptive family, to forgive their family, and ultimately to forgive society. Now that's a notion that someone who responded to the questionnaire wrote in the margin. She said, you haven't included forgiveness. And I hadn't. And I can't at this point in time. One day I will have reached the acceptance and I can then include it. But at the moment when I did the questionnaire, that was very foreign in my mind. In conclusion, I would like to read a quote. The one book that has come out that I personally could relate to is the recent book, The Other Mother. I had always referred to myself as the other mother. And when I read that book, I read it just in a matter of hours because it just really struck me. My intent is to, I have 2 copies. I'm writing in the book my experience. I'm writing dates, addresses, all those things that I had forgotten that I now have found out. And I'm writing my feelings, how they were different or the same. And I have put this quote that I'm going to read to you in the front of the book. And
This is the end of side A. Please turn your tape over and continue on side B.
So that's my thing I'm working on. I haven't had time to finish it. But the quote goes like this. It does take a special kind of woman to carry under her heart and bear a child which she knows she won't see grow and develop. It also takes a special kind of woman to take a baby which is not hers by blood and rear it with all the commitment of a biological mother without the hormonal hit which nature so kindly provides. But those special women do exist, both kinds. Why shouldn't both be honored? And I guess that's my wish. Thank you. Are there any questions? Yes?
How do you define the day of surrender? As the day you left the hospital, left the child at the hospital, or the day you actually signed those papers?
I define it, well, I guess whoever answers the questionnaire defines it their own way. I define it as the day that I gave birth to my son and took care of him in the hospital. I was 25, I had a private doctor, I had worked in the hospital, and I knew people there. And I did the adoption on my terms, which meant that I told the agency that they could not do anything other than have my son go directly to an adoptive family that day. There was going to be no business of putting him in a hospital to be checked out or any of this stuff, And so it was hot, and the social worker was late, and we finally got to the agency, and the priest was waiting to baptize him, and the adoptive parents were waiting, and the social worker grabbed him away from me because we were late. And that's the moment I surrendered. That's the moment I realized that I didn't have any meaning in life at all, that my job was done, and that nobody cared one hoot about me. And that's a day that is still very, very painful for me to think about. So the moment of surrender, I think, for each birth mother is different. I had pre-signed all of the papers because I wanted the birth parents, the adoptive parents, to bond to him immediately. And I wanted them to feel entitled, and I felt that I wanted them to realize that there was no way I was going to change my mind, that if I was going to do this, I was going to do it right. And in my mind, that was the only right way to do it. But of course, I don't know that there ever is a right way to do it. But he had one other story. A year ago, he has two adopted brothers, a brother and adopted sister, and they don't want to meet me. He does not want me to meet his parents. He won't even show me a picture of them. I've said to him, well, I get sort of paranoid if I'm in the same room, I wonder if they're going to be there. And about a year ago, I gave a talk at a university in New Jersey, and there were 3 people in the room. It was a women's conference, and these 3 people surely didn't fit. And there were 2 women who looked sort of like sisters, and there was a man. And I'm sure it was his parents. And they sat and they glared at me, and then they cried. But I would love to meet them because I'd like to know, was it really them, or is that my fantasy? And, what is the reality? Because I think that's important. But he won't allow me to contact them. He says he's waiting for his mother to make the first move. And she has no support system. And neither does he. Are there any other questions? Yes?
I'm an adoptee, and just for my own information, why is the anger so high towards the adopted parents?
My anger toward the adoptive parents blossomed at the point of reunion when I wrote them that letter. I wrote them the letter the next day saying, thank you so much for the pictures. Thank you for being so thoughtful. Thank you for bringing up my son. He is so perfect and wonderful, and I couldn't ask for anyone with greater values or, I wasn't tuned in a lot to how genetic things tend to be, but I really gave them credit for everything. And I became very angry when they didn't respond. And I think what happened in reality is that John was very moved by the experience of reunion, and so was I, and that I probably wrote the letter too quickly, and they probably were very frightened by the emotions that were being expressed, and it probably scared them away. Yes?
If I may, I'd like to add something. I have 4 adopted parents, and I've had 2 children from surrenders, and have been involved with the adopted group for many, many years. Much of the anger of adopted parents comes from them being the focus point. When we surrender our children, yes, the social worker takes you and gives you to these other people. The social worker is only temporary. It's the adoptive parents who become real in our minds. They're the ones who have you. They're the ones who have what we are not allowed to have. So it comes from frustration. It comes from deep, deep sadness. It also comes from learning and hearing that they were misrepresented to us by the doctor, the social worker, and anyone else who may have been involved. The social agency that I dealt with gave me exactly the picture that I wanted for my daughter. Many years later, when I found her, and I learned that she was not at all in the kind of home that they told me she was, they broke that promise to me. In effect, the adoptive parents broke the promise that was made to me. They're not responsible. Now, please understand there's a difference between being responsible and being the focus of the anger. Also, as birth parents, we hear more terrible stories about adoptions that don't work than we hear the good stories. In my particular case, my daughters are in loving families. But I have several friends in the groups that I belong to that they found that their children are not in the kinds of loving, warm, nurturing homes. But these are war stories. These are the adoptees who are unhappy with where they are and are looking for the answers are the ones that we meet. The ones who are satisfied, are in loving homes, have good lives, have what was promised to us that they would have, are the ones that we don't meet. So those of us who are angry use your folks as a symbol. We're not really angry at your mom. We're angry at what she represents.
Yes, and it's if adoptive parents can be a little bit generous, I think that it's safer to be angry at an adoptive parent than it is to be angry at yourself, which you already are, or at your child. So it's almost like the adoptive parent can fall into almost like a scapegoat category. Yes?
Because I'm an adoptive parent.
Yes.
But our adoption was private when
Yes.
we adopted our daughter, so we didn't have to go through an agency as such. But after the search, we did a search for our daughter 2.5 years ago and found her parents, and that was really quite good. I love them to pieces. They love me. I keep telling them, she needs all the love she can get and want them to be in her life. But her father still says he knows it was the best thing that he let her be adopted, which I kind of thought was like, don't you feel sorry? I want them to wish they had her, I guess. But now that I found myself in the point of having, when she got pregnant and then she relinquished her baby 3 years ago today, it was really hard for me because I was there when the baby was born. I kind of felt like it was my baby in a way because it was, Mom, what do I do? Mom, what do I do? And I had both my kids cesarean, so I didn't even know what a pain was. And I'm having to do all these things and see this baby born and then take care of it and help her. And I see the anger down here so high on parents. And of course I tried to be supportive, but I'm not saying that I didn't have a lot of emotional pain myself because I just didn't really know what to do. I'll never forgive myself for letting that baby go, I guess, but I have to. But I'm coming down to the point that what can I as an adoptive parent do for my daughter, because you are birth parents, my daughter's a birth mother, and I don't know, she calls me, just the other day she called and said, Mom, I want my baby back so bad. And I try and be strong for her, and then I cry later. But how do you try and be open with them and honest? Or when are you not supposed to be honest? I mean, should I just don't really know where I'm at. Can any of you birth mothers help me to know what to do with my daughter?
My theory is that honesty and reality are the best way, no matter what. I can always deal with reality. It's my fantasy of things that gets me into trouble.
I don't want to hurt so much because I hurt.
You hurt, and it's good that she knows that you hurt, because that'll help her to not deny the fact that she hurts. And that will help her to do the grief work. If your daughter had had a sibling who died, it would probably be much easier for you to go to the library and find a book on how to help someone get through grief. It's the same kind of grief, only the person hasn't died. So in some ways it's worse. People have said, that of divorce, that divorce is harder than the loss of a husband because the husband's still always out there, or the wife, or whatever, whoever you're talking about. So you were with her, and the more you can talk about your feelings and your own grieving, I think that can help her.
But I went through a part where I was wondering if she had this child to really let me know how bad she felt because of adoption. I mean, it's like, Mom, you really don't know. I went through this part, and then I also went through the part that, well, then, just 5 months ago, she had another baby, and she isn't married. And that one, we kept. But her boyfriend says, when she tries to talk to me, and she lives out of state now, he says, well, see, the first time they told me from the agency that I was a grandmother and I didn't have any rights. I had to be there and take care of her and help her and support her and take her home from the hospital and do that, but I had no rights. Now this time her boyfriend tells her, well, remember, that isn't your real mother. So why do you really care, how she feels about us living together and some of these things? And so therefore I'm saying, okay, maybe I'm not this baby's grandma now. So when am I ever going to be a person?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, that's what Sharon Karen was sort of alluding to this morning. And I'm going to talk tomorrow about extended families and and sisters and brothers and aunts and uncles and nieces and nephews, because I think that's a subject that's never touched upon. There's a book on surrogate mothering that was written, and there's a slight allusion to the reaction of the other children in the family to that surrogate pregnancy. But no one considers these other people who are living through it. And
Yes, the other girl tell me how to treat my daughter.
yes.
What can I do for her?
The first thing is doing counseling.
She's been to counseling some, but she doesn't have access to counseling now, and
Because that was my biggest thing, is no one at first would even acknowledge that I went through it, and I had no one to help me work through it. So
well, May counseled with her quite a bit. Do you think she had enough? I don't know. Only once? I was thinking you saw her more than that.
so she needs to get through the grieving process and go through what we're going through 25 years later. She needs to do that now.
And she needs help to do that. I said to you, I started to heal when I got help. And in my case, I was so depressed that I needed medication to get me out of the depression so that then I could talk about it. But you sometimes need another person who's not a mother, who's not related to you, who's not a husband, who's just a neutral person.
And I keep trying to, because of finances, she doesn't have that, and it's like, where are you going to find something? She gets real upset at night because she's a night person, and during the day she keeps busy, so she blocks it out, and then at night when there's no access, then this all comes out again. But I just try and say, well, honey, I love you, but I don't know if I'm...
The other thing is the thing I often say to students who work with whose parents are alcoholic. I very often say, well, if you go to Al-Anon yourself, then they can help you. And maybe if you were to get help yourself, then they would help you get help for her. I just feel that therapy is a learning experience. And I know that there are people who don't feel that way, but I happen to feel that way. It's wonderful. Yeah, okay. Well, I'm not... You had a question.
Well, I was just going to say that I think that you probably can't be the one who can help her. And maybe that's clear to you, maybe not, but because you are in the loop, just because of who you are, all the dynamics around that sort of cancel you out as someone who can help her. Whatever you say gets loaded by your role and by all of her stuff.
Yes, absolutely. And that's a very important. You see, you can't be the right person, and there are two things that I'm reminded of by your comment, and that is that I have two daughters in my family, my own daughters. I gave birth to them. I brought them up. I parented them. And yet, at this time in their lives, when they're trying to become independent from me, I cannot tell them what to do. I have to sort of pull myself back, and sometimes my husband says what he thinks, but I'm the wrong person. And also in a situation where there's a step-parent, the step-parent will try to be a good mother, and very often the therapist will say, you're doing everything right, but you're the wrong person. There's just too much for a girl and a mother. Sometimes it just won't happen. Because there's too much, like you said, you're already in the loop. Yes?
I just like to add that I agree with everything you said. You can't be her counselor, but as a birth mother, I would have loved it if somebody had cried with me. And please, and I would have loved it if somebody wasn't strong and just could be hurting with me.
Yes, and you see, my mother, when she told me that she had known that I was pregnant, and that she had known that I didn't have measles, and that's why I didn't go to my brother's graduation, and that she knew that I had had a child, and she knew I had sent her a letter saying I loved somebody. She said she saved the letter for several years and then threw it away. I insisted that she meet John. They came to visit, and she met him that night. He was very polite, and she was very polite. She never has mentioned him since. About 6 months later, I was on the phone with her, and I said, oh, we went to see John's condo the other day, and she said, who's John? So she's in denial like you can't believe. It would have been very comforting if my mother had reached out to me in some way, if she'd had the strength to be able to do that. It would have helped me at the time, but it also would have helped me now. Someone over here, yes.
I just say when my mother and I went through this, the best thing that she did for me was to tell me that she was sad and that she missed my daughter and that she was scared, and to tell me what she wanted out of the whole thing. She never told me, this is how you need to deal with this, or this is what you need to do. But she said, this is what I need and this is how I'm feeling. And it turned out we felt a lot of the same things. We were going through it the same way. So we could go through it together.
Yeah, thank you. Just her honesty. There was a question in the back.
One question I had is, has her daughter considered or been interested in search herself, not for her child, but in relation to her own origin?
Well, see, we found her birth parents, but the adoption agency recommended, she said she wanted to find them before, and they recommended that she waited until after she had the baby, and I did not know that. And if we had found them, it would have been different, because we found them about 6 months afterwards.
Part of what sounds like is going on with her is that search for who she is.
Yeah, well, see, that I think was part of it, but that's been very good, and it's the attorney lied to us, and so it took us 3 years to try and find it. So I mean, that was another thing. But
Yeah. Another question. Yes.
I'm assuming, by the way you're talking, that John was your first pregnancy?
Yes, John was my first pregnancy.
And did you have any struggles or feelings to go through, to then go on and have your daughters and bring them home?
No, I wanted desperately to have another child. Yes, and I think I probably got married for that reason. My husband has been wonderful. He's a real support. But he knew when I married him that I had given a child up for adoption and that I desperately wanted to have children. It's very interesting because I'm very conscious of my pregnancy with John. I remember every minute of it. The two of us must have been very deeply bonded because we were isolated, we were alone together. I just had nothing else to think about except being pregnant with him. When I was pregnant with my two daughters, I don't remember the pregnancy at all. I don't remember his labor, as I had a wonderful doctor. She was incredibly kind to me. I don't have any idea what she did to me during labor, but I have no recollection of it at all as being painful. It seemed to be very quick. It seemed as if next thing I knew, there he was. And then I went to sleep for the next day and a half or something. But with my daughters, both of them, I remember the delivery and the labor vividly. It was both very difficult. And both of my daughters were colicky babies for 3 months. Very, very difficult babies. And when I met John, I said, tell me, did you have colic? And he said, no. And so I lost my nice, sweet, good baby. I have a doll that's my good baby. Yes.
I wanted to ask you, I had a reunion with my son 10 months ago, and he was told when he was 10 that his mother, his adoptive mother, was not his mother. And he said, where is my mother? And he says, she died. So now he's 31 years old, and he has accepted me, I think, emotionally, but not intellectually. And I want to hurry up. I want to hurry up and get this done and over with so we can be close again. And I feel deprived on that because, I mean, he's always been with me, and they have told me that he can't accept my living because he has 20 years of believing I was dead. And I'd just like a little more input or clarification on how I can accept this better.
Sure, he grieved your death, and now here you are. I met someone... Yeah, I met someone 2 years ago at the AAC conference. I think I mentioned her. She had surrendered a son, I thought, at age 25, which was the same as me. She searched at the same time I did and had very bad luck, could not find her son. Finally, it was discovered that she had given birth to a daughter, not a son. And the grief she went through was horrendous because she had to grieve the son and then she had to deal with grieving the daughter. See, I really feel that reality, that's why I'm so opposed to sealed records. Reality is something we can all deal with. It's the other stuff that gets us hung up. Yes?
Two comments. First of all, I would like to say that I don't think any birth mother in this room consciously got herself pregnant in order to prove something to her mother. She didn't get pregnant so that you you could find out how she feels, or how, so that someone else could, I don't remember exactly what words you used, but yeah, somehow it felt like she did this to you. I never did this to my parents. This was something I got myself into, but I didn't do it because of them or to prove something to them. It was something in me that a need had to be filled. Separate from that, and I would like some feedback on this. Some of the groups that I've been involved with address the issue of forgiveness, and you did a lengthy thing here on forgiveness. And there's been some, I'm not sure that I like that word forgiveness. I don't feel that I can forgive my mother for certain actions or lack of actions. I don't feel I can forgive some of the people who lied to me. I can say it's okay now, I accept that this is how it is, but I can't say, gee, I forgive you, everything's all right. And I'm wondering,
Yeah, see, I have trouble with that too.
That word, I'm wondering if there's a better word that would more, I mean, I know therapy says you've got to forgive yourself for this and that and the other. I can't say it was okay what I did. I can say I've learned how to live with it, I've learned how to, I've come to terms with it, I've accepted how things are.
I think acceptance
If
is
I had
the...
it to do all over again, I damn well wouldn't do it. So I can't say that I forgive myself because it wasn't the right thing to do. It wasn't an honorable thing to do. And I don't like that word, and I'm wondering if we can come up with a word that's more acceptable.
Right, and one other thing, though, that I really want to add is that I was not a bad person. I could feel guilty about myself, but I was not a bad person. And what happened to me started long before I got pregnant. And until I was about 12 years old, I was a wonderful, perfect little girl. And so, you know, when you talk about things like statutory rape, even if a young child of 13, and this was not my situation, was willingly involved in a relationship, nonetheless, it's statutory rape. This person doesn't have the ability, really, hasn't matured sufficiently to fully participate. And I was not a bad person. Forgiveness I have trouble with too. I mentioned it because someone had made that comment on one of the questionnaires, and I know it's an issue. I know that Origins has had this long thing about, you know, did you abandon the child? Did you throw him away? What did you do? You know, and that's related also to acceptance and forgiveness. I think acceptance. Maybe someday when I'm older I can say forgiveness. I don't know.
I think forgiveness is something to shoot for.
Maybe.
I don't think you should abandon it, but I think acceptance comes first, and I don't.
I shouldn't bring this up. I was just teaching students. Bring it up. I was just teaching students about the Holocaust. These are little college kids, you know. And first of all, they couldn't begin to comprehend it. But do you ask for forgiveness in that case? I don't think you do. Can you ever forgive that? You see, and that's essentially what you're saying. The systematic abuse of the birth mother.
Forgiveness means that you make it okay.
Right.
If you thought it was okay, it would be forgiven.
Okay, well, you see, I'm not a religious scholar, and I really, you know,
It's
it's...
to decide not to hold ill will.
Right, okay.
Letting go for two reasons.
Yeah, and that's what acceptance is. And that's the end of grief work. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, see, I can tune into the letting go.
Yeah.
I can tune into the acceptance. And I can tune into the place where, well, I'm okay with where I am now. Forgive, I can't get to that word. And I don't understand how someone can. I can't understand how a birth mother can turn around to her mom or her boyfriend or her social worker or whoever it was who wasn't there who should have been and say, oh, it's okay, you're forgiven. I can't do that.
Maybe there's a difference between forgiving what somebody's done and forgiving that person.
Okay, she's making a difference between the act and the person, yeah.
Without forgiving the act.
We have another comment.
Okay, this is making a little bit of sense.
Yeah.
I found my son, he was age 30 last year, and it's been wonderful. And
Congratulations.
it's just been marvelous. I contacted his birth father to see if he wanted to know my son, and he didn't, and I became so outraged and angry. And my searcher, who was a very wise woman in Wichita, she was in Wichita, Kansas, she was unable to come. She said, Sherry, until you learn to let go or forgive or whatever word you want to accept that you and the biologic dad can't be this nice little couple that come reclaim your son, you're giving away your power, you're being victimized. And so, in the sense of accepting what others do and accepting what you do, to the extent that that leads to forgiveness, it leads to empowerment.
Okay, yes. And acceptance, it leads to empowerment, which is really the bottom line. Say it one more time.
This is quoting someone else that was very wise. To the extent that you don't forgive, you feel a sense of victimization. You got done too. And we all know that the more empowered we feel, the stronger and healthier we are. So whether you use the word forgiveness or you just use the word empowerment,
It's really taking back some of what belongs to me.
Yes, it's
Mm-hmm.
it's taking your responsibility so you weren't done too.
And that's what the whole process of search and reunion is all about. And as long as you can let go, then you're less of a victim. And as long as you're hanging on to those feelings and you're not able to let go, then you're more of a victim.
Yeah.
And the less of a victim you are, the more empowered you feel. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay. Yes.
On your figure number 10, you had mentioned that, or it looks like the anger goes up post-reunion.
For who? For whom?
Well, that was my question, like a review on that.
Okay, let me find number 10.
And my question about that is, when that does return to birthmother, did you notice that there was a correlation between how rapidly in succession there was a search, a find, and then a reunion right after search and find, or if there was any correlation between distances of time?
No, I didn't check that at all. That was not part of the survey, and I have no data on that at all. The anger goes up post-reunion toward the adoptive parents, and interestingly enough, the helplessness, the hopelessness toward the adoptive parents disappears in that time post-reunion. The hopelessness comes back when you get to today. Can you see the hopelessness, the one at the very, very top?
I understand what that's about. Did you?
Well, I can speak for myself in the sense that what I think it's about is that after reunion, for me, I hadn't felt any anger toward the parents. After reunion, I did. But at the same time, I felt less of a victim to them because I had met my son. So I was not as hopeless. It's as if my anger was mobilized. See, I equate hopelessness with depression. And I feel that anger is sort of the opposite of depression as long as you're focusing it on somebody other than yourself. So the fact that post-reunion, I almost see it as a healthy thing. If you can focus the anger on, if you end up focusing the anger on the adoptive parents, you're less hopeless, and therefore you're less hard on yourself immediately post-reunion. And then as time passes, the hopelessness comes back. That's what this shows. Now, I want to get a lot more people to fill out the questionnaire before I want to make any definitive statements on the subject.
Respond to the young lady about
that as regards adoptive parents, a lot of anger is focused in that direction. What I have found, though, with my experience is that I contacted my daughter, and then she told her parents like 6 months later, and I've not had a reunion yet. That's still pending. I then received a real long, nasty letter from my daughter's adoptive parents, in which it appeared to me that a lot of her unfinished issues and 20 years worth of her anger was totally projected onto me. That she stored that up, and I was the focus. You were talking about it previously, the other way around, being the focus. I think that's the spectrum of two extremes.
That's a really important point.
And that devastated me. And now what's happening is I'm extremely careful with the potential for the reunion. The parents are wanting to be real controlling, and they want to meet all of us together. Everybody wants to meet together all at the same time.
How old is she?
She's turning 21 here in June.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's common for adoptees to be angry.
She's a college graduate.
They want less control?
Yes, yes, and see, that's the control in keeping me out. They put a wall up. They said, we don't want the younger brother to find out.
I guess what I'm trying to do is get feedback because I'm so uncomfortable about the situation. I'm trying to establish if I should try to negotiate with them, and we are barely on speaking terms. I've only spoke to the adoptive parents once. That was an extremely brief conversation. When I had suggested meeting, I suggested a neutral place like a restaurant or whatever, and my suggestions have been repeatedly ignored. They want to meet over at their house with brothers and sisters and everybody.
On their territory.
On their territory. And I'm
So
going
they-
to feedback on that.
Well, you're entering the system just when they're struggling with having to let her go anyway at age 21. So.
Well, she's been on the house. She's been married for 3 years. She got married 2 weeks after she turned 18.
I'm in a similar situation where my adopted parents are my sons, are very threatened, angry. They just can't even handle it, and he responds to them.
Yes.
Still.
Loyalty issues.
Yeah, and it's really disruptive. I met him this year. He lives in New York. I live in California, so it's real hard for us to get together. But when I went to New York about a week and a half ago for our second visit, I didn't see them for 2 days, and then I called them because I realized how much power they have. And if I undermine them, it's going to come back to me. And I hate playing that game, but I realize that I do have to a certain degree, if I want to have a relationship.
To what degree? I guess what we're talking about, what you were talking about previously a few minutes ago was the concept of letting go, the concept of the search, and the concept of empowerment. If I walk into a situation where I don't know what the ground rules are, where I stand, or anything about how I'm perceived, how is it that that's supposed to be empowering for me?
Well,
Like, I don't even know whether these adoptive parents are even going to allow me even 20 minutes alone with her.
I just told you 2 years have gone by, and I was finally alone with him.
So, she's not calling me. I do the calling.
That's typical also.
She writes me, but there's not a great deal of contact. She's trying to keep it minimized. Each time we do talk, she says, I really wish you would deal with things so that I don't get put in the middle.
I'm an adoptee, and I think that her adoptive parents no longer have that role. And, well, sure, they do if she's still buying into that, but what I'm saying is that for her to say, I wish you'd talk to them because it puts me in the middle, you can just say, this is not between me and them, it's between me and you. Well, then maybe, I realize it's not easy for you to back off, but maybe you need to back off for a little while. I would stay out of the adoptive parent loop altogether if I were you. I think you're just opening yourself up to being...
Hey, my husband's father is dying. We're flying to Pennsylvania. They're 100 and some odd miles away. We'd like to stop in for a visit. And they said, yes, stop in for a visit. And then when I did call them, they said, everybody's going to be there. Her two adopted brothers, their spouses.
Well, again, it sounds like they're really wanting to
There's
control
no
it.
reason why you have to agree with it. You can say that I'm not comfortable with that.
But on the other hand, I would go. I was sorry that the answer was not pure, but I really would go. I think it's a great opportunity. Yeah.
I would. What I'm thinking is, it sounds like, mean, they're coming across as being very controlling and very angry and very powerful. But where an adoptive parent is concerned, normally that comes from a fear that they have that you're going to take their daughter away. Right. So really, if you need for them to accept you, going in there and fighting them, which is usually a first instinct, going in there and saying, no, I don't want to do it your way, doesn't work. I mean, if you want to see her and if you want to be there, sometimes you have to play by somebody else's rules if you want them to accept you into what they want.
That makes you stronger. I just thought of something else. I also sell real estate in my other... See, adoptive mothers, birth mothers can never succeed at anything, so we keep doing all kinds of things. But someone... Wait, let me tell you my story, okay? Someone said to me, when you're negotiating a contract, you should always be the first one to leave the table, because that puts you in control. And you see, you're going into their home, and you're in control, because you know that they're afraid. You know it's their territory, so they're going to be more comfortable. They're not going to be quite so afraid, and you're in a stronger position.
As long as you know it.
Yes, as long as you're aware of it, which you are. If you walked in there blind, then you might be taken off. It might really confuse you, but you're the stronger one.
Or if you walked in feeling like you had surrendered to their athlete.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's kind of the way I feel. I feel like that they hold all the cards, and that I don't have...
Well, they can only do that if you let them.
Well, I essentially the way I feel about it is I am letting them because they call all the shots so
But you're controlling that. That's okay. You're letting them. That puts you in control. Yeah, it's in your head. Yes.
But I think it's imperative that someone can be there. Do you know?
Well, yeah, I talked to Barbara, the adopted mom, on the phone for exactly a minute and a half, and I got out that that my husband and I would be flying in to such and such a place, and could we get together on Friday evening? And she proceeded to take over and say, yes, we'll have you over for dinner. We'll probably have a barbecue. In the conversation, and she changed the subject and said, how is your Easter? Now I want to go. In the conversation, I didn't get the chance to say that our travel itinerary is so that we staying through Sunday. By the way, Sunday is my daughter's birthday. It's Sunday when I'm home.
21st.
And I don't know what
I just need to say one thing. I've been doing a search for almost 5 years. Mine is out of this country. But one thing, as birth mothers, us as adoptees, or many of us, not myself in particular, because my adoptive parents were wonderful. It's always been a very open thing, but in my experiences, as the image that a lot of adoptees are given is that you birth mothers were just terrible, selfish people, and you just didn't care and you're worthless. But in the same respect, you have to understand that the adoptive parents, by these same social workers that gave them this image of you, also in their lying to you gave you the image of them.
This is the end of tape A. Please continue on to tape B.